Welcome, everybody. Another week is upon us, and this is it'll be interesting to see what we come up with. It's been a rather quiet-ish week, other than, of course, the government still is not in session, and SNAP benefits are still not being paid. I didn't. I forgot to look up and see if the Trump administration got that information to the Massachusetts judge like she was requesting. Um, to know whether she was going to force the Trump administration to push those dollars out, like the Rhode Island judge did. It's going to be interesting if she doesn't. Where does that leave it? With one district judge saying yes and another district judge saying no, it could create quite the judicial mess to try to sort out. So, got to be interesting as we go forward. But let's go on a little bit of positive news tonight. Um, the National Wheat Yield Contest announced their winners today, and this is the 10th annual contest. So, so there was quite a few first-time winners. However, there was 4 wheat growers who had previously topped the charts, or they call it the Bin Buster Award. Uh, a gentleman from Twin Falls, Idaho, set the second highest ever record for wheat production in the U.S. behind his own record he set in 2022. He raised some soft white winter wheat, 228.13 bushels per acre. His record in 2022 was 231.37 bushels per acre. So, and that was irrigated, so he was not rainfall dependent on that. Um, the dryland winter wheat bin buster went to a gentleman from Forest Grove, Oregon. This is his second win in a row. So obviously he's gotten on how to grow some high bushel wheat here. He averaged 198.32 bushels per acre. That was 28 bushels better than his winning number last year. So he really got some good weather and obviously some good things. The dryland spring wheat category went to a gentleman in Bismarck, North Dakota, 147.8 bushels per acre. That was 30 bushels better than last year's effort, which he didn't win last year, but he figured some things out, obviously, and maybe got some good weather. The irrigated spring wheat winner was in Moses Lake, Washington, at 204.8 bushels per acre. This is his third win, not in a row, but this is his third win out of the last 10 years in that category. Um, so the wheat yield contest, just like every other contest, like the corn growers and things like that, soybeans, sorghum, is to, and I just lost my place, strive for exceptional yields, high quality, and strong profitability. I think the third part is the key in that whole thing. But this encourages wheat growers to try new and innovative management strategies. So it's not on all their acres. So they can try some things and say, okay, well, that didn't work. Or, hey, that worked really good. And we're going to carry this on to more acres next year. So this year's contest had 465 entries, which is the second most in the last decade. So that's a pretty good thing to hang their hat on, with more people being interested in participating in that and being encouraged to take a chance. Um, One of the highlights here, he didn't win anything, but it's still a pretty good highlight. He raised 70 bushel hard red winter wheat dryland in Sunray, Texas. Now, why is that important? Well, the county average is only 13 bushel. So he was well and above anything that his county is probably capable of raising. So he's got definitely some things figured out on that. Um, a gentleman in North Dakota, not sure where Hettinger, North Dakota is, but he raised some dryland hard red spring wheat that yielded 101 bushel per acre. His county average is 39. So just some highlights from that points out that these growers are trying to figure some things out. They're they're implementing some strategies to hopefully um, move them above and beyond and stay in business. So, any thoughts? Any comments? All righty. And since we can't seem to get a crop progress report from the U.S. government, let's go up to Canada, and they got their final crop reports in. So we'll look at theirs uh, since we can't look at the U.S. numbers. Uh, I've been on the phone a lot with growers over the last 2 days. Most everybody's really happy with the beans here in Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, and I talked to one gentleman in Indiana. Um, Corn, pretty well a mixed bag. Uh, Talked to one guy up in north central Iowa today. It was an absolute disaster. Um, he he typically averages about 230 to 250 bushels. His best so far, and he's got 3 fields left, about 240 acres left. His best field is 130 bushel this year. So he's about 100 bushel under what his average is. So not good in any way, shape, or form. But let's, like I said, go up to Canada. So across the Canadian prairies this year, they are saying the crops yielded above average. Saskatchewan, their crops are reporting all yields higher than the 10-year average. Manitoba and Alberta, their crops yielding higher than the 5-year averages. Now, they set a record for their crops as far as tons go in 2020 at 78 and a half. They are expecting this one to fall just a little short. Um, they're thinking without some of the final small things to come in, they're going to end up around 76 and a half million tons. So just a little short from setting a record. Um, they were lucky in Alberta. Harvest went extremely fast due to dry conditions. Um, there were still some guys wrapping up in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Um, Corn and sunflowers are going to be the last ones reported coming out of Manitoba to adjust any final absolute last numbers. Saskatchewan, they still have some oil seeds and chickpeas still remaining, but the majority of the crop is out. They're reporting all of the quality of this year's crop to be average to above average across the board. So that's a good thing. Let's see. One report came in on the Canadian Western Red Spring wheat at 13.8% protein. That's excuse me. That's pretty well in line with their 30-year average, with 92% of that wheat grading in the top two grades. 95% of the canola graded at the top, while 97% of their lentils came in at either the top or number two level. Durum wheat, unfortunately, was the one disappointment. Um, that came in with just 46.9% of the top two grades, compared to last year when they had 93% of the durum crop, wheat crop, in that top two grades. So they're attributing that downgrade in durum wheat quality to severe midge damage this year. So, all righty. Any thoughts? Any comments? Okay, we covered an article last week mentioning the grain company out of Nebraska that was going to get their license pulled because they weren't paying people. Well, they have made an agreement with Nebraska Public Service Commission, and their license will now not be pulled as long as they fulfill their obligations over the next 3 months. This does not affect all the other offices or all the other states that are still waiting for payment. This just covers the state of Nebraska so they could keep their grain license. Um, let's see. I just want to get to the bare bones here. So, as part of the agreement, they are required to provide the department evidence of a valid and active line of credit. They also have to provide all documentation on the first of each month for 3 consecutive months. Um, and it will become void if Hanson Mueller does not meet all the requirements. Um, so, Nebraska PSC said our top priority was making sure these debts were paid during this crucial time in the harvest season, and we're pleased that the company has already begun issuing the outstanding funds. So, they have 2 weeks to get the grain producers they owe money to their money, and then they will move on to the grain buyers and the next level up um, accordingly. So, so it's a good thing the producers are first in line this time to ensure that they get their funds first. Um, Now, Nebraska says that Hanson Mueller has this line of credit, so everybody's probably going to get or should get paid. But at least, like I said, the producers are first in line on this opportunity. Any thoughts? Any comments?
John, I'm sorry. Where was this money coming from? Is this bailout? I'm sorry, I missed most of it. I caught the end.
No, this is the company we talked about that wasn't going to pay anybody out of Nebraska.
Thank you.
Yep. Guess they decided they were going to pay the money.
And do you mind telling me what kind of company is this? What ranch factory?
Grain,
Grain.
grain
Thank
buyers.
you. Thank you.
Yep. All righty. Last week we also talked about China agreeing to purchase a bunch of soybeans, sorghum, and things like that. However, there was some confusion or some things that came out that kind of added some fog to the situation, if you will. Um, so, according to the White House fact sheet, who knows if that's true or not, but that's what we're going to go with. China will buy 12 million metric tons of U.S. soybeans by the end of this year. Now, the confusion, which still hasn't been sorted out, is whether that includes the 5.9 million metric tons that China bought before Trump took office. If it doesn't, then China's going to buy another 12 million. If it does, then that means only 6.1 million more in sales for this year. So that part of the confusion hasn't been sorted out yet, um, according to anything I can find. Maybe somebody else can find it. But the deal also includes 25 million metric tons annually through 2028. Also restores trade in sorghum, hardwood logs, and a range of other commodities. It also lifts the retaliatory tariffs on U.S. beef, pork, dairy, wheat, corn, cotton, and other farm products. So, excuse me. Mm, 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 mm. So this 12 million, or I'm sorry, this 25 million metric tons annually coming over the next few years um, represents a major market opportunity for U.S. producers, especially in the I states, Minnesota, Nebraska, and so on. It also represents some relief for the sorghum growers who really didn't have anywhere to go with their crop. They were kind of stuck. We've been kind of a one horse pony as far as exports go, with most of our sorghum going to China. Um, Now, the lifting of the tariffs on beef, pork, and dairy also opened up some channels for livestock and dairy product exports. Kansas State uh, Kansas State economist calls the deal an encouraging sign for U.S. farmers, especially after all the market turbulence. Um, he says it certainly is a bright spot and big news. Typically, China buys between 25 and 34 million metric tons. So 25 million over the next 3 years, if they abide by the agreement, will be pretty much historical averages. On the low end, of course, but at least that's a positive. Um, let's see. So the timing matters. Late fall, early winter are when China typically turns to U.S. soybeans before going back to Brazil in February and March. Based on current prices, that puts it at about a $4.5 billion deal. Um, and just for this year, the next 3 years, just based on today's prices, that's about a $10 billion deal. So, not bad. I think we'll take it at this point. Um, Soybeans are the number one U.S. export to China. Um, and my question with this is, how does this look after 2028, though? Um, are we going to be back in the same boat with China holding the reins with a different administration in office and having to go through this whole rigmarole again? But at least the next 3 years should be relatively calm on this front. Any thoughts? Any comments?
The only comment that I have is that all of these deals that our president announced are they're good, but none of them is final. They're all kind of only understanding or memorandum of understanding, if any, but not all the details are not have not been sorted out yet. So it may or may not happen. Hopefully, it will happen, but at the moment it's just talk.
Well, I think this one actually is a done deal. Um, I agree with you, though. Most of them, I agree with you. Most of them haven't been. So it does. I agree. I agree with you. It kind of lends its questioning at best. So,
A done deal is when documents are signed. Nothing's been signed.
well, China always likes to play this game of rejecting things at port too, and they've done this for years. It's not anything with this administration. This is a game they always play. But I think at this point, some of the tariffs have hurt them more than they probably would like to admit. Obviously, it's hurt us, um, no doubt about that. So I think this is one of those things that it is mutually beneficial if everybody plays nice in the sandbox for a while, um, and let everybody kind of go back to their corners, get a little relief before resuming stupidity. So at least that's the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong.
You mean as long as everyone's playing nice in the neoliberal sandbox, like
Yes.
we can all get along. I think that's the thing here that's um I don't know if it's Trump or if it's before that. I don't think we need to really make it uh horribly political in that direction unless we want to. Like that's fun too. But um it's certainly the case that we're moving away from that sort of thing, right? We're moving towards what it would seem is like some sort of statist, um, like planned trade deals and such. And it's like, okay, here we are. That's what's happening. I just wonder, outside of all of that, like how much that influences producers in the U.S. to not rely on the government for these kinds of things. Like I wonder, not trying to take us in the weeds or anything, but I do wonder, like, if you can only rely on like 4-ish years at the max, 4 years, probably less, of some sort of stability for your business. At what point do people, especially in agriculture, because this is a long-term game that we're all playing. This is not like 4 years long, or 8 years long, or 12 years long, or 16 years long, even like 24 years long minimum, I would say. Like, at what point does it, like, do we see things change, or as far as business models, or do you think that's just not something that's going to happen?
Well,
So,
you're making my head hurt tonight, Alon.
so, so again, trying to avoid politics as much as I can, but I think that until the current administration, I think direction was on long-term policies, and unfortunately now it's daily or weekly policies, if at best. And I think that you're saying 4 years. I don't think it's 4 years. I think it's 4 minutes policies, and I think that's what hurt businesses because, as you say, you need stability. You need more than 4 years. You need many years to in order to plan, and some businesses require a lot of investment and planning. And until this administration decided that all of this uncertainty is not helping anybody or the majority of us, then it's going to be hard to plan. And then we are in day-to-day planning rather than decades of planning.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and I guess that's I agree with that, generally speaking, right? Like, I feel like that's how a lot of people are feeling. Um, I guess my question is just that. Okay, so like how, like, I'm curious to see if people actually change their business models somewhat to avoid this kind of thing, though, right? If it becomes so unstable, like because our politics become, for whatever reason, maybe it's because our politics are so divided, maybe because we can't agree on things. The thing about business, and the thing about, like, owning a business that supports your family, maybe it supports more than just your family, but at the very least it supports you and your family, is that, like, you don't really have the luxury of worrying about, like, the political parts of these things. Like, the reality is in your face, like, no matter what. And so I just wonder, like, when the reality is in people's faces, if we see business models change from ones that require or are 100% reliant on, the government's trade deals, or if we see something different blossom uh, from the ashes.
So I think part of this is the complexities we see in agriculture. We have obviously changing weather patterns, and we're not going to go down that road because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it tonight. We have the complexities of we've basically become a one trick pony. A lot of areas, all they take is corn and soybeans at the elevators or the ethanol plants or the biodiesel plants. Uh, they're the crush plants, whatever the commodity may be. And it would be difficult for producers, unless a lot of people get together in one community, to have an elevator change or something change that would enable different crops to be grown in that particular area, wherever that area is. Um, Unfortunately, we've kind of gotten siloed into all of these things. One area grows a lot of areas grow just corn and soybeans. Um, I was talking to somebody on Sunday. I forgot what day it was. Um, and we got on the thing about in my area, we grow a lot of corn. We have a lot of corn residue. We could graze a lot of cattle on afterfeed on residue. However, a lot of people have pulled out their fences and they're not putting them back in. Um,
The agronomists are also telling people not to graze cattle for
yeah,
compaction and nutrition.
the
Don't take it
agronomists are
off.
stupid. The agronomists, but I know.
Put through a cow.
Yeah, well, a lot of these agronomists have never had cows or been around cows either. So there's that. Um, well, and I can't argue that. I mean, if you're growing 100 and, and I'd have to go back to my notes. I think if you're growing 175 bushel corn, you have about 250 pounds of potassium in those corn stalks per acre. Now, the problem that these agronomists are missing, or the keys these agronomists are missing, is that a lot of these producers do not have the soil health to break down said corn stalks in a manner that those nutrients are going to help that next crop. If you can get them crushed under cattle hooves or get them chewed up and processed through the cow, those nutrients work their way down into the soil profile and then they're ready for that next crop. That's the part that and I've heard this, and I thank you for bringing it up, Brian, um, that they're missing to this whole equation. Um, but back to the other
I
part.
bring it up because I'm pillaging the ground for cornstalk bales right now that I'm not going to put fertilizer on this year.
Jeremy?
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's kind of to my point that I was, or to my question, right, about the business model or the way people decide to change things, because like that might be true now, right? It's like it's not that these agronomists are wrong necessarily; they're just not telling the whole story here, right? And if the whole story spans more than one administration, maybe not worrying about like squeezing out an extra couple of bushels of a crop that may or may not be profitable depending on who's in the White House. Um, like maybe it's okay to take a hit in 1 year because you've integrated cattle into your operation or a feedlot or something like that. Where you can bale the corn stalks to use as bedding and then haul back out the manure or whatever it is. Like that's what I'm literally talking about. Where like that sometimes that doesn't pencil, right? And everyone's like, oh, that doesn't pencil. You should just do this. You should just do this. But when we add the element of uncertainty that comes with changing administrations that may only last 4 years and at max last 8 years, um, like that's where I'm wondering if people, this changes anything for people, especially considering I don't know, maybe the current disruptions aren't as big as the media hypes them up to be, but um, just considering all that, I mean, we're importing beef, right? Like, I think we can find a little couple corners, couple shelter belts to stash some cattle, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm just like a coastal elite over here, spouting my mouth off about this stuff, but I feel like you could stash cattle a couple of places out there. I've been across the country a time or two, and I'm pretty sure you could figure out a place to put them.
Thank you, Jeremy, for giving me a laugh today. I appreciate that. um, so, my one hope in this would be that people would look back to diversity My fear is that we're now one or two generations removed, even for these landowners, producers. They haven't had livestock on the operations. They haven't had to deal with, especially in me and Brian's part of the world, water in the winter, making sure cows have plenty of feed if it snows too much, and things like or ices. So it's back to a learning curve uh, with a lot of these operations if they did bring back the livestock to their operations. Uh, so it's kind of like turning an aircraft carrier around. Uh, it can't really happen very fast uh, because, as Jeremy pointed out, I mean, this is a decades long project that families are on. Um, you just can't retool quickly. Jeremy?
Well, I would just say um, the farming community is some of the most innovative and like problem solving oriented people that I've ever had the pleasure to engage with. Like it's next, like you can't even describe it, so I'm not going to try to. Like you either understand what I'm talking about or you don't, which is fine, but just trust me. And so I say that though to say, like, if if the current business model collapses, right? Like that's the only way it happens. Um, because they're not going to just sit there and let things just go, you know, go to shit. They're going to solve the problem. It's like, wait, how much money do we need to keep this place at the end of the year? And they're going to sort it out. And um, anyway, so I think there's some opportunity in that as well. We can leverage the problem solving capabilities of agricultural America a little bit there, right? And that was a cagey way of saying the government needs to stop bailing out business models that don't cash flow, and then we will see what actually uh, sorts this whole economy out, this agricultural economy.
Yep. Nope. Absolutely. Anybody else? Alrighty. Sorry, guys. I'm just not feeling 100% tonight. I'm struggling. Alrighty. Okay, the other big topic, which is probably the biggest topic people are talking about here in the U.S., is SNAP benefits, people going hungry, and so on. So, just to give the quick details, I came across an article that has some resources for people if they are not getting their benefits or they're short on cash or whatever to purchase food. Um, Roughly about 42 million people on SNAP. Um, California has one of the higher averages in 2024, and this was kind of sobering. The average household in California spent about $300 a week on groceries. Uh, that's pretty staunch, or that's pretty stout. So 25 states are suing the administration. As I mentioned to Pat off the get go tonight, I didn't check if Massachusetts judge had gotten the information from the administration that she was looking for last Friday when she made her decision. Uh, and that will be interesting to see if Massachusetts decides that the administration's right. How do you sort this out when the Rhode Island district judge said no, the administration needs to pony up the dollars? Um, it really does create quite the conundrum. when you have two different states, district judges, U.S. district judges, come to completely different decisions. So the average benefit per participant per month is $187.20 for the U.S. average. Um, Federal SNAP spending was just short of $100 billion. In 2023, adults between 18 and 59 accounted for 42% of the SNAP benefits, children, 39%, and adults 60 and over at 19%. Um, sorry. Let's see. I'm trying to get down to this part of the article here. Reason we brought it up. So there's a group called Flash Food. It's a grocery app that partners with grocery stores to sell their surplus food at a discount. Uh, in this article, they said there's 2,000 grocery stores across North America, and they offer fresh food, including produce, meat, and dairy at 50% off or more. Of course, food banks, if you do have the um, finances to help out with food banks and all that, or maybe you have some soup kitchens in your area or something like that, something you can help with. Feeding America has a website called Food Bank Finder to help people locate the closest food bank to them. And also, if you want to donate, um, let's see. So, there's a lot of national nonprofits. Like I said, Feeding America is one. No Kid Hungry is another one that assists at the national, state, and local levels. In Virginia, they have what they call the Virginia Fresh Match. If you know anybody in the state of Virginia, anyway, that lets individuals double the value of SNAP benefits used for fruits and vegetables. Uh, there's a group called City Harvest. Uh, that one's in New York. So if you know anybody in the state of New York, there's that one, probably more around New York City, but you can find out. It's called City Harvest. Um, they said they are working to expand distributions to their food pantry partners to expand or to get to areas with high numbers of SNAP recipients. And then Urban Gleaners, they operate 21 public free food markets. Um, and they said just since Trump took office in January, their market attendance has increased significantly. They do obviously expect a substantial rise without the benefits showing up November 1st. Um, and yeah, there's the USDA's National Hunger Hotline, 1-866 3 Hungry, the number 3 Hungry. Um, so, all righty. Anyway, just kind of wanted to put that out there. If you do know some people in areas or you wanted to donate, um, there you go. Any thoughts, any comments? All righty.
Yes, it's saddened me that we consider ourselves one of the richest countries in the world, and we're talking about hungry people. We should not even be talking about it, let alone have them. We should be, everybody in this country should be able to eat.
Yep. Well, yeah, that's a whole nother complex issue, which could take a while to unpack. But yeah, we can go down that road. Like I said, I'm not 100% tonight. So, and I did post that article in the chat just so you guys can get a hold of those resources if you so desire.
Well, I think this issue too is like there's some legalese going on, which because I looked into it a couple weeks ago, and I just couldn't make sense of any of what the arguments were. And I guess I'll just spell out my confusion. Like, I know that the FSA offices have been open for the past week in a limited capacity to write checks, right? And a lot of that money is part of the Farm Bill, which the SNAP program is part of as well. And so I was like, that's kind of funny. Like, why can't they just, like, the funds have been appropriated, but anyway, it just seems like, again, like I said, it seems like there's some legalese going on there where somehow, like, appropriations don't mean that checks get cashed or whatever, or checks get written or whatever for certain things. So, yeah, I don't know. It seems like an unnecessary problem to me. It seems like a not good problem. Doesn't matter whether you support the program or not. It seems like pulling the benefits out from underneath people is a bad thing. It'd be way better to just, like, if you're for shrinking the program, just shrink the program. When you have a farm bill. I don't know, but it seems like both sides are dug in on this. Like, maybe we won't have a government anymore. Which, anyway, that's another conversation.
That's a whole deep rabbit hole,
So
Pat.
I was just gonna say, so these check writings, these money disbursements require bodies, right, to administer the programs to get the money out. Correct? Anybody?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I
I
So,
mean, maybe
Computers, guys, computers.
not
It's all
not really.
computerized. You
Yeah.
know, these
but
people are on the
okay.
program. If they're on the program, it's done automatically. Nobody's sitting writing checks. You may not be able to get new people in the program because the government is shut down, but all these people that have been getting the money, just like people getting social security checks, they get it automatically. They're still getting it.
Okay, so the reason why I say it that way, I know there's not physical checks going out, but the reason why I say it that way is, and I'm just thinking about the financial aid office, right? Even though systems are set up automatically, someone still has to do the checks and balances before the release of those funds. There's someone actually, a lot of times it has to run maybe a report or some type of analysis feed out before it actually happens, right? And so I'm saying it this way because then that requires a body. And if that body has been furloughed that handles that particular task because the government shut down, so they're not going to release those monies. We have to remember that also the president made it very clear that many of these programs are considered democratic programs. And when I say it like that, I say when it comes to feeding America, he sees a lot of those programs as democratic programs. So therefore, those releases are not going to happen because they fall under his mindset of a democratic program. That's why I was getting at that.
That's a fair perspective. Anybody else?
Of course, it's obvious it's only Democrats are hungry. Republicans are all well fed.
Now, you know that's been debated every which way from here to here. Um, yeah, but yeah, wow, yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that's the case, but I don't. But the problem is you can't disentangle, or whatever the word is. Like, you can't uncommingle SNAP benefits from farm payments. Like, they're appropriated in the same bill,
Not this time, though,
and
Jeremy.
so I don't really think you know like I'm here to throw the entire government under the bus. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying, like,
Amen to
I
that.
I have heard people I very much respect and get along with swimmingly say things like, I really hope the Democrats just let like all this just fester, right? And they don't budge. And I hope SNAP benefits. And I'm like, you're supposed to be a Democrat. What the hell are you talking about, right? And so I think we just got a good old case of I don't know what you want to call it, but like this, like the government isn't working for anyone currently, and I don't know how to fix that, but that's definitely a big problem, and it's not a partisan one.
I know how to fix it.
Yeah, write the
Stop.
check.
Wait, here, it's simple. Stop paying Congress, right? If we stop paying Congress, if that wasn't part of their prior negotiation that they get to get paid while all this is happening, each time it's happened, if they weren't getting paid, I think it would be a whole different story. But I can say, I really can say that I do stand behind the holdout for the subsidies for insurance. And again, I've said it, I've got great insurance from retirement, right? So it doesn't affect me, but it will affect many, many people that I don't even know. And that trickle down effect is devastating. That's why, even though they were temporary subsidies, it's just something that I really feel strongly about, that could really have a very negative trickle down effect. It's kind of like canceling um, um, the farm bill, right? Just taking the farm bill away. Boom, let's just move all these subsidies, or even if you don't take the whole farm bill, but you take some of those really good benefits of subsidies away without having a prior plan, how devastating is that to our farm world, right? And so with the insurance, as Shannon presented an article last week, they're very concerned. Our farmers are very concerned because those subsidies affect them. And again, that comes back to those words used, that those are Democrat programs, when at the end of the day, they're American programs. It's not one side or the other. It's taking care of America and our farmers.
Okay, so to Jeremy's point, and I'm not going to go to the details, but the point is that at the moment they're not talking, and you can't expect one side, no matter who it is, if it's going to be, today it's the Republicans, tomorrow it's the Democrats, it is has the majority, not to talk to the minority at all and expect them just to say, yeah, I'm going along. And I think that that's where our democracy is failing at the moment, that not the sides are not communicating.
Well, I think you come on a good point, Alon. Is we've changed the language in this country to call this a democracy, and it's not. We've lost our way in proceeding down that road with that narrative. We're supposed to be a constitutional republic, and unfortunately, we have diverged from that path badly. And I'm all for canceling the elected officials and the bureaucrats' paychecks that are still getting them at this point. In fact, they should have to pay it back with interest, in my opinion, um, because they haven't done their job. The other point is we don't have a farm bill. They've just been coming up with emergency funds to keep farmers and ranchers in business at this point, uh, which is just stupid. You know, get out of your own way and either pass a farm bill or do away with it altogether. And to Jeremy's earlier point on the previous article, I think it was, farmers and ranchers can figure this out if the government gets out of the way. Yeah, they might have to grow another crop. It may be such a thing as what farmers are left in a community to get together and say, hey, we're going to start growing oats because corn isn't paying. Or, hey, you folks grow corn, we're going to grow oats. And those of us that have cattle will have feed. And those conversations obviously are going to be very different for different parts of the country. and so on. But also a possible good point coming out of this whole SNAP fiasco is that maybe we actually get communities to somewhat come together again to support those that are struggling, those that have less than, um, and all of that. Maybe this is maybe that will be a good thing that comes out of this whole fiasco. And the other part, maybe we can get a lot of these elected officials who have been there way too long out of office, because I'd hope that people are pretty well sick of all this crap that's going on whatever side of the aisle. Both sides need to go. So, anyway, just my thoughts.
As respect to your illness, I'm not going to debate with you of democracy or whatever else we are. But the point is that we have representatives, and you can call it any way you want. And you expect our representative to talk to each other, to represent everybody's interests, and more importantly, the country's interest. So it's not my interest from Chicago and not your interest from Iowa or whatever. It's further foremost the big thing that we call the United States. And if so, by deciding that we don't want to talk, we are not helping each other as a country and as citizens. And I think that, and again, we can, and it's not important now if it's about healthcare, about SNAP, or it's about whatever. The most important, we have representatives that refusing to come to sit in front of each other and say, we are not going to leave this table until we're going to solve the problems of this country. And yes, the minority have some voice, and we pay attention to them because the minority is not two people, it's close to half of the population. So that's what I'm saying.
Yep. And I'm not disagreeing with that part of it, Alon. I agree that this is one of those things where, especially our elected representatives, should be representing what is right or what is right for the country. And unfortunately, it becomes an R and a D issue instead of doing the right thing because it's the right thing. And I'm all for your idea. Lock them in a room. You don't get out of here until you guys come up with a deal. Um, Guaranteeing some of those old folk probably aren't probably going to survive very long, but guess we can have another election.
I mean, if they would just shorten the bills up, everybody could have they could have an actual list of topics that they could cover. When there's bills are 3,000 pages, they're all fighting for their own issue, and none of them probably really understand the other side's stronger issue that they're fighting for, because they're all trying to line pockets for somebody every single time they do one of these.
100%, Derek. I agree. Kyle?
Yeah, to the point of SNAP and the food subsidies. When they're locked in that room, they shouldn't have any food or drink either. I think that would draw attention to the fact of how uncomfortable it gets, and never mind the fact that we're talking about a number of hours, not a number of days.
I'm not as harsh as you. I think bread and water will work just fine. One loaf, one slice of bread, couple, 1 gallon of water a day, and you guys can get out of this room whenever you decide.
As long as it's tap water.
I was just gonna say the exact same thing. Yeah, they can drink their tap water. No Pellegrino or Perrier or whatever Fiji. No, it's Washington D.C. tap.
I think we got this solution. I knew this group could figure it out. All righty. Any other thoughts or comments? As I mentioned, I did pin that article in the chat there. So if you do want access to those resources, um, uh, it's in there. Sorry. All righty. One of my least favorite worldwide organizations, the FAO, says that water plays a critical role in ensuring food safety in the fisheries sector. So this comes from a report from them on strategies to minimize microbiological risks and promote public health through effective water management practices. So, in the fisheries sector, water is used when fish are cleaned and chilled, um, and also indirectly for cleaning, sanitation, and temperature control. So, the FAO held a workshop in Honduras about the safety and quality of water used in fisheries. 11 countries represented with scientists, regulators, food businesses, and food safety inspectors. Now, the main goal was to present findings from microbiological risk assessments and then fit for purpose versus clean water approaches. So, the experts from the FAO said decision trees must be adaptable to local conditions, including seasonal variability, infrastructure limitations, and long-standing safety practices. They also highlighted the importance of assessing water sources and identifying hazards. So, some of the representatives said that challenges in their respective countries are inconsistent definitions and resource limitations. So, one individual brought up shrimp farms, which they visited some of those also in Honduras, which provided practical insights into water management. And some of the challenges with that were managing seasonal variability in water quality and the presence of birds and other animals, increasing the risk of fecal contamination. Also, uh, thresholds and enforcement vary by country. Sorry. So, clean water doesn't meet the criteria for drinking water. However, it does endanger food safety. So, attendees emphasized the need for a risk based, fit for purpose approach to water use in fish production and processing. That included assessing water sources, identifying hazards, evaluating treatment options, and implementing multiple barriers to ensure safety. That could include filtration and disinfection or good hygiene practices and hazard analysis, along with critical control points. So, also, the FAO's expert, quote unquote, committee on food additives released a report evaluating the risk posed by inorganic and organic arsenic species. Experts reevaluated the food safety risk of various small and complex organic and inorganic arsenic species, incorporating updated toxicological occurrence and dietary exposure data published since their last review. So, no new human studies were identified that would alter the previous assessment that inorganic arsenic causes lung, bladder, and skin cancer. So, going to have to take arsenic out of the diet, folks. Sorry. Any thoughts? Any comments? That's about as humorous as I'm going to get tonight. All right. All righty, crop insurance. So the harvest price for crop insurance does fail to offer higher safety net protection than the spring price. The average for December corn futures closed October at $4.22 a bushel. November soybeans closed at $10.36 a bushel. So the price protection is going to use the spring crop insurance guaranteed prices. End of February was $4.70 a bushel for corn. $10.54 for soybeans. So the harvest price is set based on the average throughout October, and the closing price for the November soybean contract and the December corn contract. So revenue protection policies use the higher of the projected price or the harvest price to calculate revenue guarantees, unless the farmer opted to exclude the harvest price as a way to lower premiums. Revenue guarantees are determined by multiplying the higher of the projected or harvest price by the farm's actual production history, or what they call the APH. yield, and the chosen coverage level, which typically is 75 to 85% across the Corn Belt. So, based on the risk management agency, the crop insurance price guarantees apply to roughly 90 million acres of corn and 75 million acres of soybeans. Both totals are lower than the USDA's planted acres because some farmers chose to self insure their crops instead of dealing with the government. So the final crop guarantees reflect the relatively low volatility compared to recent years. In 2023, corn prices fell more than $1 from the February average to the October average. Soybeans dropped 92 cents that year. In 2024, there was a decline of 50 cents for corn and $1.55 for beans. This year, not as wide a spread, 48 cents on corn, 18 cents on soybeans, namely because we got a late rally on the soybeans. And so, using the typical 80% revenue protection coverage level, the deterioration of prices through the growing season is unlikely to trigger an insurance payout unless there is a reported yield loss. And that is, of course, a result of the protected prices from February setting a fairly low floor when coverage level was accounted for. So they only get 80%. If they did 80%, they only get 80% of that $4 and what did I say? 70 cents. So it's going to be kind of hard to trigger that number at this point. Worse if they did the 70%. But anyway, um, so USDA commodity costs and returns were not updated in October. May not be in November if the government's still shut down. But the most recent per bushel cost based on September data said we had a U.S. break even on corn at $4.81 a bushel, a break even on soybeans at $11.95 a bushel. Doesn't paint a very rosy picture for profitability, does it? This year marks the third straight year corn prices at harvest have come in below the spring guarantee. 2020, 21, and 22 harvest prices for corn were better in the fall than the spring. In 2021, the harvest price for corn reached $6.86 a bushel, highest level since we'd seen since 2012. Soybeans have not beat out the spring price since 2021, when we saw November futures end at $12.30 a bushel. The harvest price triggered for soybeans in 2020 as well. But prior to that, the harvest price had not triggered for corn since 2012 and hadn't triggered for soybeans since 2016, according to the Farm Bureau. Drought in 2012 led to the highest fall harvest price guarantees on record, with $7.50 a bushel for corn and $15.39 a bushel for soybeans. All righty. Probably doesn't mean much to some of you, but at least if somebody does listen to the recording, they'll have that. Anybody? Thoughts? Comments? Uh, so,
I mean, I specifically got up to 90% coverage because I knew it was probably going to be a year it'd be worthwhile. So on soybeans this year, it did pay out the price differential.
yeah, if you went that high, yeah, I can see that, Brian. Good thinking on your part. Um, Jesus asked, what happens to the crop after it's deemed a total loss? So typically, if it's a total loss, it depends. Sometimes they will, if there's a few stocks standing or a few things standing, they'll go ahead and harvest it so they have an actual number to look at. If you get like a hailstorm that makes it look like a parking lot, they just zero it out and that's the end of it. You don't have to burn any diesel or wear and tear on your equipment to go over the fields. So it depends. but on what that field looks like that is deemed a total loss. Used to work with a grower in Kansas. They had some hail damage on some corn. The crop insurance adjuster made him take the combine out. He averaged, I think, just under 40 bushel, if I remember correctly. Um, you could pretty well see a group of rabbits run anywhere in that field. I don't know why they made him do it, but other than they had a number. But you know, that's about the um, extent of it. So, any other questions, thoughts? Don't know if I can answer them tonight, but definitely crazy. All righty. Gluten free. That is a subject that we hear a lot with people saying they have sensitivities to it. But what does that mean for the industries? Um, so, gluten sensitivity, according to a bunch of surveys and studies, affects more than 1 in 10 people worldwide. Way more than celiac disease, which is what um, um, true gluten sensitive people have to deal with. Women are nearly twice as likely to report symptoms as men. The UK and Saudi Arabia show higher than average rates at 23 and 36%, respectively. 40% of self reported sufferers follow gluten free diets despite unclear causes. So, the gluten free global market is growing. The market is expected to hit about $13.67 billion US or 11.88 billion euros by 2030. And celiac disease, which is a very serious disease, is a condition caused by an immune reaction to gluten and proteins in food like wheat, barley, and rye. It can include symptoms like stomach aches, diarrhea, vomiting, iron deficiencies, even infertility. Um, Many consumers who do not explicitly have celiac disease do not react well to gluten. So, non-celiac gluten sensitivity is widespread, according to a recent study that just came out. And that's a condition in which people experience gastrointestinal or extraintestinal symptoms like bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea after consuming gluten. Now, that's mostly self reported with no clear biomarkers associated with the condition. Now, those biomarkers are measurable indicators of biological processes. However, it has gained significant public attention, and that is why they expect the gluten free market to expand and basically explode. Um, and the dramatic growth they're attributing is driven by public awareness of the sensitivity and the desire to control it. So, according to a charity in the UK that deals specifically with celiac disease, they said it only affects about 1 in 100 people. So it's perhaps justifiable to suggest that the boom in gluten free products may be linked to the prevalence of people that just have what they're claiming is a gluten sensitivity. So I mentioned that females are more likely to self report this, with 14% saying they experience the condition, 8% of males. Now, those reporting the condition are also more likely to have psychological conditions like anxiety or depression than the control groups, according to this study. So, prevalence of gluten sensitivity also varies significantly by geography. Uh, Only 0.7% of consumers in Chile report this. As mentioned, 23% in the UK, 36% in Saudi Arabia. Like I said, 40% of people that self report gluten sensitivities follow a gluten free diet. but they still report feeling symptoms even after giving up gluten. So many of the studies explored in the review looked at the effect of fermentable carbohydrates, as those with self reported gluten sensitivities. And those are often found in vegetables, fruits, legumes, and cereals, and can cause those with gluten sensitivity greater discomfort than the gluten itself. So, cutting those out of the diet often relieved the symptoms even when gluten itself was reintroduced. Also, the study pointed out there is a significant interaction between gluten sensitivity and disorders in the way that the gut reacts with the brain. So, on top of that, there is often no difference in symptoms between those consuming a placebo and those consuming gluten itself, leading the researchers to theorize that the condition is influenced by the consumer's belief in what will happen when they consume gluten rather than the gluten causing anything itself. And they got there because there was no clear biomarkers of gluten sensitivity. So, excuse me. So, this study suggested the condition is not directly linked to the gluten itself. That may affect demand for gluten free products, as the bulk of research suggests that the link between giving up gluten and relieving symptoms of gluten sensitivity isn't always clear. This suggests that, at least for some consumers, gluten free products are not meeting their needs. Now, that isn't to say that consumers shouldn't pursue greater health, and I'm not taking skunk oil drops. It's just appreciate it though. Uh,
They don't smell. They don't smell, but they work. Okay.
I'll stick with my hot tea, honey, and lemon, I think. Uh,
It will cut the flu like right away, like a fever, allergy. You have no idea how strong they are. Well, maybe you do.
I appreciate that though. Okay, so as more research comes to light, changing demand could reshape the markets. So, will gluten sensitive customers return to products that contain gluten, or are they going to figure out what is causing the symptoms and stick with greater health, um, and the road they're on? That's the question the industry is facing. Any thoughts, any comments?
Shannon, there is a hypothesis, and they're currently studying this, that there is perhaps a correlation between celiacs and gluten sensitivity and the use of herbicides as it's increased over time. And they're the reason they sort of did the study was they found that countries that didn't use post-harvest application for burning down the crop had less sensitivity issues. So I was just wondering what you thought of that.
I'm not sure at the moment, Mark. So we've we've been using chemicals for a long time in ag, and I'm no fan of desiccants. I'm no fan of killing a crop at close to harvest and um, having those chemicals work their way into the grain part of it. So personally, I think that would be great if we would ban any chemical use after a certain stage of any crop, whatever that crop may be. Um, Now we go back to an earlier conversation on, do we have the markets in those particular areas that growers would be able to grow a different crop and be successful at it, and what does that look like, um, for those areas, those communities? And I don't think we probably know all the ramifications of those chemicals getting into our food, what that all has entailed. Um, I know it isn't good. I agree with that part of it. But I also wonder, when we look at the combination of things that we are consuming, which is in our food supply, um, and most of it human caused, microplastics, forever chemicals, um, the heavy metals, that in some cases are completely natural in our soils. Um, However, we compound that in a lot of cases with the fertilizers we're using, which, um, that's a whole different conversation. And I'm down a rabbit hole right now of seeing how arsenic, lead, mercury, and cadmium, affect our crops, and all of that on our soil health, and getting into our food. Um, it's a very deep rabbit hole, mind you. Um, but I think there's some way, Mark, that all of those things are contributing to the rise in several of the issues that we are seeing health wise, um, and even the way people act. Maybe the rise in ADHD, the rise in, um, some of these other issues that we are seeing in young adults and kids. Um, maybe some even, maybe even possibly, I'm just going to throw this out because I have no clue. Um, Possibly even the rise in, um, the educational difficulties some of these kids are facing. Um, so I don't know. I think it's all contributing, Mark, in some way or fashion. To what degree, um, I don't know. So we're taxing my bandwidth tonight.
Shannon, I'm going to add to that while you get a couple drops of skunk oil there. That I'd venture to say there's probably a tighter connection between our brain and our guts than we realize. You guys know I'm not a homeopath or any kind of these things, but I do think that our gut health does drive our mental health, and vice versa. Vagus nerve comes to mind there, and so you guys know I'm big. You guys give me a bunch of shit for my kombucha brewing and whatnot. But I think fermented foods and different things, a big consumer of sauerkraut, uh, big on dehydrated fruit. I think there's a lot of things that we've stopped, not necessarily stopped eating, but we've gotten away from as a matter of convenience. And we're not eating the same foods we once did. And there was probably a very rapid shift to ultra processed foods that is not feeding our guts, and so a lot of this discomfort may be tied to that. I don't know. The other thing is when you're talking about regional differences, I would want to see the grains, these gluten inducing grains, as we've had a sharp increase, rapid increase in global trade and allowing different grains to get to different regions. That's also a potential thing. I know this is kind of far fetched, but could a grain that's normally been grown in Europe found its way to the Middle East, or vice versa? And the people that live in that region, their bodies don't have a tolerance, for that particular germ, right? That's coming from that grain. That one's far fetched, but I do think that the gut brain thing is interconnected. You made a comment about do have some mental health concerns, right, with different folks with anxiety and different things, and so it makes me, that was the first thing that stuck out, was there a connection between the two that's maybe driving this more than we realize.
Good thought, Pat.
I agree 100% with what Kyle just rolled out there. And when you mention the grain in another country, and that, I believe too that eating what's in season where you are is also important. I also believe in all that Kyle mentioned. I don't do the kombucha, but I definitely do my own pickling of things. I'm careful with the salt part and I'm careful with the sugar, but I do try and keep a container of something pickled. Like right now, it's what do you call it? Bell pepper sliced thin in a vinegar mixture with herbs that we just pull out from. And when those are done, then I use that same juice that's left behind to put in cabbage shredded up in there. So I just kind of keep something going in there. And the other thing that people can do is when you finish with your pickles, don't throw out that pickle juice. Use that pickle juice then to add something in there, recycle that. It does not need to be thrown out. There's things you can do with that. um Also, probiotics, prebiotics, probiotics. I really believe, just like Kyle was saying, that the connection to gut health and brain is very important. And that whole breakdown that would cause that anxiety, that, the mental health issues, stuff like that. I mean, I know it's more complex than what we're touching on, but I believe that he really presented quite a few things that do affect our bodies that we don't stop and think about. I would definitely get into the anything pickle fermented as well as probiotics, prebiotics. Make sure you keep that gut healthy. It's the second brain. It is the second brain, or maybe even the first.
Thank you. Anybody else? Appreciate that. All righty. All righty. Let's get into some international stuff here. So, Ukraine has accused the Russian deputy ag minister of stealing 4 million tons of grain. Um, According to investigators, the Russian official, acting in collusion uh, with occupation authorities, orchestrated the large scale appropriation of assets from both state and private ag enterprises starting in December of 2023. So it is valued at 580 million US. It belonged to three or four Ukrainian companies. And prosecutors claim the appropriated grain was transported to Russia and occupied Crimea before being exported to countries like Syria, Egypt, Turkey, and Lebanon. If you remember, we talked about Russia being in their kind hearts giving a lot of grain to those particular countries. Huh. Kind of easy to give it if you didn't have to grow it yourself or feed your people with it. Ukrainian authorities have formally notified Russia under the Ukraine's criminal code for violating the laws and customs of war, which carries a potential prison sentence of 8 to 12 years. Um, the Security Service of Ukraine is conducting the investigation, which has previously implicated Russia's ag minister and another deputy minister within that department. So, any thoughts, any comments? Just can't play by the rules, can they? And Poland will keep a ban on imports of wheat, corn, rapeseed, and sunflower seeds from Ukraine, despite the European Union's rules changes on trade. So, the European Union temporarily waived duties and quotas on Ukrainian farm products in June of 2022 to help Ukraine compensate for the higher cost to export its goods. Um, However, European farmers held protests over low income, rising costs, and competition from cheap imports, particularly from Ukraine and the South American bloc countries, demanding fairer trade terms and lighter regulation. So the principles of trade will revert to those under the association agreement between the EU and Kiev, with duty-free imports of sensitive goods like sugar, poultry, and eggs being limited by tariff quotas. Poland's ministry said, quote, the new quotas apply to imports of goods to the entire EU, while in Poland there is still an indefinite ban on the imports of those four crops from Ukraine, along with certain processed products. No response on how the EU felt about Poland and their dissension to the EU rules. Any thoughts? Any comments? All righty. Let's go down to Mexico. And, oops, wrong place. Give me a second. Okay, having a little trouble here. So, on the Day of the Dead, and I know this is kind of a little bit behind the curve here, so forgive me. I didn't get to this one last week. See, impatial flowers. Their flowers have bright orange petals. Um, Cloak everything from city streets to cemeteries across Mexico on the Day of the Dead. And yes, I did try to practice that word and I still managed to butcher it. So there we go. Um, Now, on farms on the fringes of Mexico City, the flower is known as the Mexican marigold. It's been farmed for generations and takes the spotlight every year on the Day of the Dead celebrations. Now, growers say that they have faced the changing weather, and that has limited their amount of flowers that they grow and can sell at market. Um, so, farmers obviously depend on the weather to cultivate their crops. And they say they lost half of their flower crop from heavy rains and flooding this year. Uh, and even not having the money to buy any fertilizer when they needed it. So the orange flower has become a symbol of the country's celebrations. Um, and it is believed to be a point of connection between the worlds of the dead and the living, with the bright petals that light the path of dead souls to the altars set out by their families. So the flowers are also a crucial economic engine across Mexico. Some groups predict it rakes in about 2.7 million US or 2.3 million euros for farmers this year. So one particular family has been growing the flower for the last 3 decades in a rural borough south of Mexico City. And they continue to carry on ancient farming techniques using canals that wind through their farmlands like a maze. So every year they plant the marigold seeds in July and grow the plants as the rainy season winds down. For consecutive years now, they've gotten heavy rains, droughts, floods, and other weather that has made it difficult to keep their crops alive. They estimate that the torrential rains this year wiped out more than 37,000 acres of the crop across the country. Um, Despite that, production broke a record of 6 million plants as farmers planted more acres. Probably a good thing. Um, in addition to the different weather, it brought on more pests, disease, also rotted the roots of some plants and areas. One family estimates they lost 30% of their crop. Another in another part of Mexico estimates they lost close to 50%. Um, let's see. So, government scientists are searching for long term solutions beyond the short term economic relief provided by local governments. A small seed bank is working hard to come up with different varieties. Um, and they've saved up thousands of seed variants of native plant species, including 20 variants of this Mexican marigold. Um, so the biologist in charge of this seed bank said part of the reason that the crop has been devastated is that farmers in recent years elected to use a hybrid variant from the U.S. It produces a shorter, more uniform looking plant that's easier to sell in mass and in places like supermarkets. That means farmers have turned away from more of the sturdier native breeds, which have longer stalks and widely varying color, size, and texture. but the genetic diversity of these Mexican breeds makes them more resilient to the changing weather. The biologist said, or she said, that these native seeds have adapted to different geographies, high altitudes, low altitudes, places where there's lots of rain, places where there's very little rain, and a lot of these native varieties are resistant to the insects they face. These hybrid seeds are bred for another purpose. They just don't have the genetic diversity needed to take on all the various challenges. So, let's see. Several farmers are saying they're looking at other crops and may have to resort back to the native species to ensure that they can maintain their livelihoods. Any thoughts, any comments? All righty.
I was trying to get back to my mic. So interesting. That's very interesting. I had no idea that was going on with that particular flower. I can say here that our cemetery is at its most beautiful at that time of the year. I mean, to see a huge area um filled with the gold and all the different other colors that are incorporated, but so much of that gold, it's overwhelming. It's absolutely beautiful. I have not been in Mexico during that time, so I haven't seen it there, but I know my husband has. I can just say what we witness here is absolutely beautiful. And so that flower is very important. And when I leave my home, the agriculture area that I pass, most recent, of course, they had been growing the flowers, and it's just a beautiful sight. As well as if you're familiar with um, Vandenberg Space Force, which used to be Vandenberg Air Force, which isn't far from me, also in that area, highly grown too, which they also grow a lot of different varieties of flowers for the flower festival. But beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Shannon.
Absolutely. Anybody else? All righty. Let's go up to Montana. People have decided to donate their whole 38,000-acre ranch, estimated value about $21 million, to the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. This will ensure that it stays a working cattle operation rather than being sold off or converted to other uses. So they have had a rotational grazing system on this operation for 35 years. Um, Now, competing interests, we've talked about some of these. Looking to buy ranches, acquire grazing acreage, places to put solar panels, wind farms, all that stuff. Um, some organizations looking to take livestock completely out of the equation on some of these ranches. Um, and we've talked about the difficulty for younger generations to get involved with the livestock industry or even the crop side of things. Um, it isn't just the land, which $21 million is not a drop in the bucket unless you got Kyle, who's probably got that in his pocket right now. But you have to buy the cattle, you have to have equipment, you have to have labor, um, everything that goes along with maintaining all of that. And they decided that this was the best route to make sure that um, it stays in livestock production, especially cattle. Um, they do run a few sheep too, which that's just kitty food for the mountain lions. But anyway, um, so His ranch tells the story of the rural depopulation across Montana's northern plains. The 36,000 acres supported at one time a lot more families than it does. At one time, this 36,000 acres supported 76 different families throughout history. And that is the homestead claims that are now incorporated into that 36,000 acres. Um, so in 1926, a struggling neighbor approached this gentleman's grandfather saying, maybe if I lease my place to you, that between us, we can both survive. Um, the neighbor finally gave it up, moved to Southern California, um, and never came back to Montana to obviously ranch. Um, Now, this ranch supports three families, and property costs are making it hard to justify an investment in ranching. Um, so, the Rancher Stewardship Alliance started in 2003 from concerns about outside interest acquiring ranch land across northern Montana. And lady who is their executive director said the organization formed when ranchers started to stand up a little bit more to say, hey, we've been the ones stewarding the land. People who were not on the ground were saying that needed to be done or changed in the landscape. And that's really where the alliance was born out of. Um, so during a severe drought, they approached the Nature Conservancy about leasing portions of their Matador Ranch to struggling local ranchers who are facing liquidation of their herds. And this model has now operated successfully for the last 20 years. The core mission is, what can we do for ranchers so that they never have to sell their ranches out of production ag? So the nonprofit provides conservation cost share programs. It helps producers with projects that benefit both ranching operations and wildlife habitat, from wildlife friendly fencing to reseeding native grasses. Now, they got their first National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant in 2017, and they've been able to hire staff and bring conservation dollars directly to the ranchers. Um, so their formation was catalyzed by the American Prairie Reserve, which has worked on assembling a massive wildlife refuge in the same region by buying ranches and converting cattle operations into bison habitat. Um, so the American Prairie confirmed their organization was actually one of the first members of the Rancher Stewardship Alliance before tensions escalated and they had to split ways. Um, he also went on to say critics of the American Prairie Reserve become unhinged when debating about the future of ranches on the Great Plains. So these two organizations offer what sound like different but overlapping visions for the region's futures, but they do maintain their conservation goals are generally aligned. So the American Prairie Reserve supports about 900 head of bison, and that's a controversial fact for some in Montana, with some critics perceiving that as sort of neutron bomb in that part of the world. So, as American Prairie buys family ranches and converts them into bison habitat, contingent of locals in the area where the group is driving longstanding families from ranching. However, their director says nothing can be further from the truth. He said, we've done 53 land deals and only one family ever left the region. At the same time, American Prairie has 15 people with families and children living in Phillips County. Um, let's see here. So, as Montana grapples with a high profile debate over the future of ranching and conservation, Wyoming has not seen the establishment of groups like the American Prairie or the RSA. um, he said ranching succession has been an issue for, or I'm sorry, The director for the Thunder Basin Grasslands Prairie Ecosystem Association said ranching succession has been an issue for a long time. And as land prices continue to go higher, how do you pass that on generationally is more and more of an issue. So, the fundamental challenge facing a lot of ag operations, you have multiple children. So, it may be difficult to leave the ranch to one of them because that's pretty much all the assets the family has. So, what do you do with the rest of the kids? So, a lot of Wyoming ranch families are choosing conservation easements and also exploring other succession strategies. Um, so, for this Montana ranch family, the decision to donate rather than sell reflects practical realities and deeper values about maintaining Montana's ranching heritage. The average age of ranchers is now at 60 years old, and full time ranchers under 35 represent just 12% of the ag population. So the ranch will eventually offer access programs through the RSA, providing aspiring ranchers who don't have $20 million in their pocket to buy a ranch, and then, of course, several million to equip it, a chance to enter the business through education and carefully structured leasing agreements. So it's going to be interesting as these two organizations continue for the amount of acres up there, um, and what that's going to look like for the Montana ranching community um, in the future. So, any thoughts, any comments? Alrighty. Last article for the evening. I think I'm going to throw in the towel tonight. Okay. So the FFA had their national convention last week. Um, Another article we didn't get to last week, but I came across an article about what colleges at the convention were really looking for in students. So the last few years, the National FFA convention has been held in Indianapolis, Indiana. And of course, there's a lot of things for the kids to do, to see, a lot of functions to attend. And 80 universities, um, Kyle must have bowed out, and colleges were in Indianapolis. And they're looking to recruit students to carry the future of ag forward. And here's some from some of the major universities that were there. Texas A&M said we want students who do something with what they learn. Said we're not looking for the theoretical. We want students who will do something, take their education and use it to make an impact. Texas A&M has more than 30 majors in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, and the gentleman who was there for Texas A&M said FFA students stand out immediately. They're confident, professional, and know how to present themselves, and that kind of presence matters. University of Illinois said it's about what you're willing to do. It's not about what's on your transcript. It's about what you're willing to do once you get there. Study abroad, intern, join organizations, and take advantage of every opportunity. FFA students bring fresh perspectives. They already have a network, they're confident, and that helps them transition quickly into college life. University of Georgia said passion above all else. They want students who are passionate and willing to take advantage of every opportunity. Agriculture is Georgia's number one industry, and they prepare students to lead that industry. About 60% of Georgia's students now come from non traditional ag backgrounds. And the lady who was there for the university said they're the cream of the crop. They already have leadership, communication, and professionalism. They're ready to represent what they believe. Cornell, one of the big ones out of the Northeast, said, "Don't be intimidated by our name." Cornell is the only Ivy League school with a College of Agriculture, which I didn't. I kind of thought so, but I didn't know for sure. They are New York State's land grant institution. They offer 22 majors with agriculture, environmental, and sustainability focuses, and about 12% of the incoming class has an FFA background. The lady that was there for them said FFA students are some of the most well rounded applicants we see. They're confident, professional, and carry themselves with purpose. Um, because they are a land grant, they give students hands on opportunities to work with farmers and local communities. Oklahoma State. They said that they're a life giving community. Not looking for a checklist. They want students who want that community, a place to belong and grow. So, Oklahoma State has students that come from 47 states and a 50-50 split of traditional and non traditional ag backgrounds. And that diversity of experience makes their classrooms and their students stronger. FFA students come connected, communicate, know how to communicate, and lead. Purdue, motivation and impact. They want students who are self driven, who want to learn, to grow, to make an impact. And FFA and 4 H experiences make a difference, and they really do see that in their applications. About 75% of Purdue's ag students come from within Indiana. The rest are out of state or international. And they are seeing a rise in suburban students discovering ag through science and technology. And the last one, University of Florida. Um, so she likes the versatility that defines the FFA students who succeed in college. They want students who are adaptable, people who embrace new technology and also communicate effectively in traditional ways. We need professionals who can reach all kinds of audiences. Um, she also emphasized the importance of experiential learning and a willingness to dive into the dirty work. Said nobody loves it, but getting your hands dirty and learning by doing is what sets our students apart. Builds confidence before they're even out in the field as professionals. Just wanted to share that perspective from the universities there. So, any final thoughts? Any final comments?
Good night, everybody. That is good to know that education is recognizing that part. So important, the practice. And
Absolutely.
that's not just fill the mind with the things that cannot be put in practice. But thank you so much. I'd like to hear that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Maria. Anybody else? All righty. We'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Central, Lord willing, and I don't feel any worse. Um, we'll muddle through another night. But great conversation. Appreciate everybody being here, as always. And everybody have a great night, or in Mark's case, a great day. And we will see everybody tomorrow.